Party and J.D. Vance's watch party in Ohio. Tonight, this election will be decided by the American people. Will they elect the governor of Pennsylvania, or will they elect the vice president of the United States? We shall see. First polls are starting to close soon. It is November 7th, 2028. And the first few polls will be closing the Shapiro vs. Vance election. We will be right back as we show you our newest electoral map. And we will be right back with all of your newest and most needed election updates as we get them. And we can officially start calling these at the decision desk of the Election Prediction Committee. Thank you for standing by, and we will continue our broadcasting of the 2028 election in a few. And we can now officially project at the Election Prediction Committee news desk. Indiana and its 11 electoral points will be awarded to the vice president. No surprise here, as he usually, and Republicans usually, win this state. And now we can move on to South Carolina, where the vice president is predicted to win. This did not used to be a Republican stronghold, but we now know that this is a very, very Republican state. At least it is slowly starting to look that way. We can now call Kentucky for the vice president with its 8 electoral votes, expanding his streak into this election. We can now make our first call for the Pennsylvania governor, with him winning Vermont in its 3 electoral points. We could also call Virginia, which is turning increasingly blue, as J.D. Vance did not campaign much in this region because it is very well known to be a Democratic stronghold. This is our current electoral map. As it stands, J.D. Vance has secured 28 electoral votes, while Josh Shapiro has gotten 16. Remember, a candidate needs 270 electoral votes to win the White House. We've got a long way to go tonight, and neither have won the keys to Pennsylvania Avenue. We can now call North Carolina for the vice president. This did not take long at all to project, and its 16 electoral votes go into the vice president's column. J.D. Vance's home state of Ohio is projected to go to him with its 17 electoral votes. This is a must-win for every Republican if they want any chance of winning this election. We could also call the second most Republican state in the U.S., West Virginia, and its 4 electoral votes for the vice president. After this wave of poll closures, and Georgia, we are officially done counting, and it goes to J.D. Vance very narrowly. He only won by a 2% margin, and it was much more narrow than 2024. He then, my apologies, we can now call that he wins Georgia and its 16 electoral votes. This is the current updated electoral college map, and we will be back with more updates as soon as we can bring them. We can now call Alabama a very Republican stronghold, and its 9 electoral votes for J.D. Vance. This is a huge poll closure, so stick with us. We now call Connecticut for Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro with its 7 electoral votes. We could also call Washington, D.C., and its 3 electoral votes for Josh Shapiro, the capital of the United States. We could also call Delaware for the Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, and its 3 electoral votes. We can now call Florida, which has turned increasingly Republican in the past few years, and he won by a bigger margin than Donald Trump did in 2024. We now have Josh Shapiro's first big state other than Virginia, Illinois, when he wins 19 electoral points. He has also won 3 of Maine's electoral votes, and J.D. Vance wins Maine's District 2. Josh Shapiro also narrowly secured Maryland in its 10 electoral votes, and this was the closest it has ever been in modern election history. He also wins Massachusetts in its 11 electoral votes. We could project at the Election Prediction Committee calling desk. We could also call Mississippi for the vice president and its 6 electoral votes. We could also call Missouri with its 10 electoral votes for the vice president. This is our current electoral map as it shapes up. We will be back with more updates when we can provide. We are back with no states have been called yet again, but we are here to talk about our close to halftime election status. So currently the vice president leads at 137 electoral points, winning swing state Georgia pretty early on in this election, but by a very narrow margin to Shapiro. Shapiro is at 72 electoral points. But he did win Maryland very narrow, and more narrow than any other president in modern history. As we examine why, it looks like Kamala Harris really did a number on the Democrats when she ran for the highest office of the land in the last 4 years. And we can now see that damage slowly starting to impact Josh Shapiro's campaign. But he did win Virginia in a very big landslide. So we now continue on to our next election calls. New Hampshire very narrowly enters J.D. Vance in the vice president's column. This is a huge, huge call, because usually stuff like this you don't see, as this state hasn't changed in a very long time, and it is historic. And what I mean historic, it's very historic in our lifetime to see such a blue state flip unexpectedly. We have been seeing this go more progressive and progressive as time has been going on, but we did not expect it to flip in this election. Are we surprised? Not really. Should we be surprised? Probably not. But this is huge. Very huge. Some could even say massive news in this 2024 election. Thank you very much. We can now also call New Jersey in a bigger landslide than Kamala Harris and its 14 electoral votes going to the Pennsylvania Governor, Josh Shapiro. He wins this by a pretty okay margin without many problems. We congratulate him on his victory. We now can call Oklahoma and its 7 electoral votes to the vice president's column. None of these calls have been that groundbreaking other than Georgia. which was not very unexpected, but it was pretty unexpected. But you also have to learn to expect the unexpected. We can now call Rhode Island and its 4 electoral votes for the Pennsylvania governor, which was very expected. Now, let's take a listen to J.D. Vance speaking now.
Is to take law-abiding American citizens' guns away from them. That is what Kamala Harris wants to do. But we have to ask ourselves, we actually have been able to run an experiment on this because you've got some...
And we pause J.D. Vance's victory speech. Even though he has not won yet, he is giving a pep rally as he is ahead, and Josh Shapiro has not been ahead in this whole election. We can now also call Tennessee for the vice president with its 11 electoral votes. We can also call Arkansas and its 6 electoral votes for the vice president. And this is our current electoral map. Josh Shapiro with only 90 electoral votes, and J.D. Vance with 165 electoral votes. We can start seeing it getting more and more narrow as more votes come in and more states close. Josh Shapiro is not enjoying this, and he is apparently talking to advisors to get them to do anything to get him a narrow win in the last few states. He's telling people to stay in line, keep getting ready to vote, and do not give up hope. Because he also stated, when he fights, he wins. And this is him currently mocking the Republican president nominee and J.D. Vance. If you don't know, the ticket is Vance Kennedy 2028, and his ticket is Shapiro Kelly 2028. Here is Shapiro live. Is the clip that is going on at his rally. He is currently waving to his voters with his running mate, Robert Kelly, former BBC News reporter. And we also have J.D. Vance celebrating early with his vice president pick, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., after Kennedy failed winning the Republican primary. We will be back with the next few poll closures when we can officially call some more states. We can now call Colorado in a very narrow victory for Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro with its 10 electoral votes. The Shapiro claims he is proud of this victory as he won by a very huge margin, unlike Kamala Harris. We could also call Iowa for the Vice President J.D. Vance and its 6 electoral votes, and it has been getting more and more Republican over the years. We could also call Kansas for the Vice President with its 6 electoral votes, similar to Iowa. Here at the prediction desk, we can officially confirm Kansas goes to the vice president. Louisiana, with its 8 electoral votes, also goes to the vice president. And who wins this by a less margin than President Donald Trump did 4 years ago. We can confirm this is because Louisiana is getting more and more Democratic every 4 years. So this is not a shocker. This is our current updated electoral map. 10 added to Josh Shapiro's category and column. And J.D. Vance is now only 85 electoral votes ahead. And we will be back when we get another update. We now have current and outgoing President Donald Trump speaking live at J.D. Vance's celebration rally. We can now confirm that they are getting ready to celebrate already, which is not good, because typically when that happens, they end up losing afterwards. We will now have President Trump speaking in Springfield, Ohio with J.D. Vance at their election watch party live before we call a few more states.
It's awfully bad so far.
That is all he has said about Josh Shapiro the whole night. We thank Donald Trump for his words, and we will be back in a short minute. We now have some more poll closures as Nebraska's 4 electoral votes go to the vice president, but Nebraska's Omaha district goes to Josh Shapiro with 1 electoral vote. He also wins New Mexico by a very slight margin, and this is the slightest a Democrat has ever won New Mexico in current modern day history. New Mexico is slowly but surely turning to the right as more people vote for the Republican candidates. Josh Shapiro also narrowly, but by a bigger margin than VP Harris, wins New York in its 28 electoral votes, a huge win for the Pennsylvania governor. North Dakota and South Dakota are called for J.D. Vance. We can now officially project. He also wins Texas in its 40 electoral votes, a huge win tonight. This is the updated electoral map, and it is shaping up to be a huge, huge victory for J.D. Vance, it seems. We already see him, and a lot of the states haven't even closed their polls yet, and he is already winning awfully bad, just like President Trump said. We now cut to Candace Owens for an update in a short few minutes. We now have Candace Owens on the phone. What would you like to say, Candace, about this ongoing election and how JD Vance has taken a very, very early lead, as we still have Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Hawaii, Alaska, Arizona, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Nevada, Washington, Oregon, and California still yet to close their polls.
Providing a strong support this election. JD Vance is providing strong support this election. I mean, 235 is insane. He will win. California.
That's an interesting take. You think he will win California? I think that's touche. But early polls have shown that he is likely to win the state of California. Thank you, Miss Owens, for your insights, and we will be back shortly with more poll closings. And with only 169 more electoral votes at stake, we can now call Wyoming for the vice president. We can also call Montana and Utah for the vice president. And in a shocking turn of events, California flips for the vice president. This is huge. This is shocking, as JD Vance wins California. We did not see this coming, other than early pollsters, and they were correct. A lot of people clown them for it, but he wins California and their 54 electoral votes. I think we all know what this means. And he has been elected 48th President of the United States. JD Vance is now your president-elect and current and outgoing president. Well, we now have to continue these calls, so we can now call Idaho for the vice president, Oregon for Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Washington also. Here's the updated electoral map, 306 to 154 Josh Shapiro. This is an amazing and insane electoral map. And we now have Candace coming back on the line. She was one of the first people to actually believe JD Vance would win the state of California. No one else believed it other than her and a few pollsters. It turned out to be the most correct of them all. This is the first time in such a long time that California's turned red. And same with New Hampshire, which he flipped to. And we only have swing states, Minnesota, we still have Alaska and Hawaii, which we all know will flip. We all know it will flip. But and we now have Joe Rogan live on his podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, after JD Vance is called the president-elect and outgoing vice president. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is now the vice president-elect. Here is Joe Rogan.
Celebrating she was made president-elect.
Yes, that was a short but sweet little speech he gave on the Joe Rogan Experience. We now also have JD Vance live with his victory speech. We now go live with his victory address. Thank you all for an amazing 2028 election season, but we still have more to call, which is insane. But we can now begin to start finishing up this election. Thank you all for tuning in, and we now get to watch his victory speech live. Please welcome President-elect J.D. Vance to the stage. This is a dedication to President Trump.
What's the greatest political company in history.
And he is still being modest and thanking the current president and outgoing president. Republicans are making a severe comeback. Yep, we did. He sure did come back. And that is all he had to say for now. We now continue to announce a few poll closings. Hawaii is projected to go to Pennsylvania governor. We had a very small poll closing. We now can call Alaska for the vice president and president-elect. We now call Wisconsin and Minnesota for J.D. Vance and Josh Shapiro. This is our current electoral tally. Pennsylvania has gone to the Pennsylvania governor. And our current score is 319 to 187. Next. November 8th, 2028. We now can call Michigan for Josh Shapiro, the Pennsylvania governor. The only states we are waiting on is Nevada and Arizona to close their polls and finish counting. We can now call Nevada for the Vice President of the United States. We now have J.D. Vance, 325 to Josh Shapiro's 202. We now have Arizona called for Josh Shapiro, and this is our final electoral map of the 2028 election. Thank you all for watching this hypothetical breakdown of the 2028 election. This is my prediction, and I do not think California's going to flip, even though I predicted it. And I do have confidence this will flip, though, to blue. But I really do hope